You're watching No Shame with Shane, where the takes have no lies, no bias, but most importantly, no shame. I'm your host, Shane Fordham. Now, jumping straight into it, the Commanders officially extend Terry McLaurin. Terry McLaurin is back with the squad. He's healthy. He's going to be playing. He's set to play week 1 against the Giants. And honestly, with Terry McLaurin being back officially on the Commanders jump straight back to the top of my list in terms of biggest threats against the Eagles in the NFC. I think it's no question the Commanders are the biggest threat to the Eagles right now in the NFC with this sort of reunification or reunion with Terry McLaurin. I think Terry McLaurin, I mean, honestly, I don't think there's anything that this Commanders offense cannot do with Terry McLaurin. Terry McLaurin, as I said before, makes everything better. Is a significant improvement to this offense. He's a boost to this offense. Having Terry McLaurin, bringing back Terry McLaurin, you give your all-time rookie quarterback coming off of an all-time historic rookie of the year season, you give him his number 1 receiver back in Terry McLaurin. Having Terry McLaurin also makes it more likely for Deebo Samuel to have a bounce back year, with the field being more stretched with the attention that'll go to Terry McLaurin. With Terry McLaurin being a deep threat and Deebo Samuel being more of a all-purpose wide receiver, ball carrier, short yardage type of guy, it also spreads the offense out more and makes it more likely for young guys like Jalen Lane and Luke McCaffrey to succeed and produce within the offense. 2 guys who have been very impressive throughout training camp and throughout this offseason, especially with their play styles being more deep threat type of receivers than Deebo Samuel. It makes having Terry McLaurin on the field, it stretches out the field more for them and gives them more room to be able to operate and produce, especially when they have an accurate and elite capable quarterback like Jaden Daniels. Having Terry McLaurin on the field also stretches out the field and creates more room for the run game to succeed. Now that defenses have to, kind of protect over top and protect against the deep attack between Terry McLaurin and Jaden Daniels. Creates more room for guys like Austin Eckler, Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, Jeremy McNichols, Chris Rodriguez to create and find success in the run game. Makes it easier for the offensive line to create more lanes for those guys to run through. Now that defenses have to play over top and worry about the deep attack and deep threat of Terry McLaurin. Terry McLaurin does a lot of different things for this offense, and having Terry McLaurin, it makes this Commanders team the biggest threat once again to the Eagles this coming season, just like they were last year. The Commanders are the biggest threat to the Eagles right now in the NFC, but most importantly, what bringing back Terry McLaurin does, most importantly, is make Jaden Daniels that much more dangerous. Jaden Daniels, the guy who was coming off of an all-time historic rookie of the year season, proving that he was the greatest rookie quarterback of all time, bringing back Terry McLaurin makes that guy more dangerous, makes that guy more likely to have the MVP caliber season in which I thought he was going to have after last season. Bringing back Terry McLaurin makes Jaden Daniels more likely to have that MVP caliber season. And honestly, as an Eagles fan, I am more scared of Jaden Daniels now than I am of any other quarterback in the NFC. Just the same way I felt last year. Like, I was already worried about Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels, by far, to me, is already the second best quarterback in the NFC. I am more, like, just overall, I am more worried about Jaden Daniels as an Eagles fan than I am any other quarterback in the NFC. If you look at really the Eagles' biggest competition in the NFC, you look at a couple teams like just overall talented teams, the Rams, the Cowboys, the Vikings, the Lions. You can maybe even throw the Giants in there, with how they're sort of progressing this year. Like, maybe even the Bears, possibly the Packers. Like, you look at all of those teams, I am way more worried about Jaden Daniels and the Commanders than I am any of the other quarterbacks on those respective teams. You look at Dak Prescott. As an Eagles fan, I am more scared of Jaden Daniels and the Commanders than I am of Dak Prescott and the Cowboys. Dak Prescott is a guy who we know puts up elite numbers in the regular season, but a lot of those elite numbers come from subpar teams that Dak Prescott stat pads against. Dak Prescott stat pads against bad teams in the regular season, which is why we see such a drastic difference of him in the playoffs, where we don't see that regular season success translate to the playoffs. He puts up huge numbers in the regular season, but can't carry that over into the postseason because the teams that he is playing elite or looks elite against are average to below average teams in the NFL. I am not worried about Dak Prescott and the Cowboys as much as I am Jaden Daniels, because I know who Dak Prescott really is. He's a guy who will put up 4,000 yards in the regular season, but will then turn around and have two interceptions to a young Packers team in the playoffs. This Dak Prescott is a guy who will lead the league in passing yards and passing touchdowns in the regular season, but will turn around and lose to Jordan Love and a young Packers team in the playoffs. He may throw for over 400 yards, but he'll also have two pivotal turnovers that'll lose the Cowboys the game on their biggest stage of the season. Unlike Jaden Daniels, who is a greater version of himself, who is more clutch, who has more of a clutch factor, who has more ice in his veins during that point of the season, as we saw this past postseason, as we saw in this past playoffs. Like, Dak Prescott is going into a season where he really has one of the less talented teams he has ever had since being the starting quarterback for the Cowboys. Dak Prescott is going into a year where he doesn't have as many all-pro guys, Pro Bowl caliber guys on offense and defense as we have seen him have during his sort of era in Dallas. Dak Prescott has had really a stacked team since he took over that starting job for Tony Romo. He's had all-pro guys, Hall of Fame guys on offense since really taking over that job. He's had Dez Bryant. He's had Amari Cooper. He's had CeeDee Lamb, where CeeDee Lamb, the team was so stacked, CeeDee Lamb was the number 2 on the squad. He's had a prime Ezekiel Elliott. He's had an all-pro Hall of Fame caliber offensive line with guys like Tyrone Smith, with guys like Zach Martin. Oh, just some of the best offensive lines in the NFL. Still wasn't enough for him to get it done in the playoffs. He's had all-pro caliber defenses, Pro Bowl Hall of Fame caliber defenses that were on the field when he wasn't. Guys like DeMarcus Lawrence, guys like Stephon Gilmore. He now has Micah Parsons, a healthy Leighton Vander Esch. He has had all-pro caliber defenses on the field when he wasn't, and that wasn't enough to get it done. This is one of the least talented teams Dak Prescott has ever had since taking over that starting job in Dallas. But I'm supposed to believe Dak Prescott is a bigger threat than Jaden Daniels to the Eagles this year, when Dak Prescott couldn't get it done with the super talented teams he's had in the past. I'm supposed to believe he's a bigger threat to the Eagles than Jaden Daniels this year, going into a season where he has even less talent than he has before. There's no question Jaden Daniels and the Commanders are a bigger threat to the Eagles than Dak Prescott and the Cowboys. There's no question Jaden Daniels and the Commanders are a bigger threat to the Eagles than Jordan Love and the Packers. A talented team, a talented young team. Jordan Love, of course, having a very high ceiling. One of the arguably more talented than Jaden Daniels, or at least on caliber with Jaden Daniels talent-wise. Has weapons on offense, has weapons on defense. But Jordan Love is inconsistent. Jordan Love is inconsistent. Like, he has like Jordan Love. Jordan Love is not only inconsistent, he also has receivers that can't stay healthy. Christian Watson is injury riddled. Jaden Reed, uh, Jaden Reed, Romeo Dobbs, all are dealing with injuries right now. They have a rookie, Matthew Golden, who is already looking like the receiver one in that receiver room, which should tell you something. On top of having injury riddled receivers, you know, Jordan Love is inconsistent. Like Jordan Love is a guy who is capable of putting up big numbers, but he's he's been very disappointing in the playoffs up to this point. Like aside from that Dallas win against really a Dak Prescott who folded, after that, aside from that playoff win, Jordan Love has been very disappointing in the playoffs. After seeing the Cowboys, they see the 49ers, where Jordan Love had under 200 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, but also had 2 turnovers. They saw the Eagles this year in the playoffs, over 200 passing yards, but 3 turnovers against an Eagles defense. 3 turnovers against an Eagles defense. There's no question Jaden Daniels outperformed Jordan Love against that very same defense that same postseason. There's no question he outperformed Jordan Love on that stage. He had more passing yards than Jordan Love against the Eagles defense. He had more passing touchdowns. He had more touchdowns than Jordan Love against that Eagles defense. And he obviously had less turnovers. Jordan Love is very talented. He has talented weapons on the field when healthy. But he's inconsistent. And this year, his main guys in the passing game are dealing with injuries. Even though he has Josh Jacobs, who was an offensive player of the year caliber guy last season, one of the best running backs in the NFL, even though he has Josh Jacobs in the backfield, Jordan Love is inconsistent. He's young, and he has weapons on offense that can't stay healthy. So Jaden Daniels and the Commanders are a much bigger threat to the Eagles than Jordan Love and the Packers. As an Eagles fan, I am more scared of Jaden Daniels and this Commanders team than I am of Jared Goff and the Lions. Jaden Daniels is a bigger threat to the Eagles than Jared Goff. Jared Goff, as we know, has a stacked team. All the talent in the world on offense and defense. Multiple Pro Bowlers on both sides of the ball. But Jared Goff is a true system quarterback. Jared Goff is a true system quarterback who is able to execute in the right system, but isn't enough of a playmaker to be able to overcome his circumstances when that system is not working. The Lions are coming into a year where without both of their coordinators from last season, both of their head coach caliber both of their head coach caliber coordinators. The Lions are going into a season without Ben Johnson calling the offense and without Aaron Glenn calling the defense. We've seen how important the right coordinators are to a team, how much of an impact losing 2 coordinators like that at the same time can mean for a team based on what we saw from the Eagles in 2023. Stacked team, all the talent in the world, pretty much all of the starters returning the following year, pretty much. But after losing Shane Steichen and Jonathan Gannon, even though it was a playoff team, still had an historic collapse towards the end of the year. That Eagles team showed us how important having the right coordinators are and how impactful it can be for a team like that coming off of a Super Bowl run to lose those coordinators going into the next season. There's no question, and there's no question the Lions could face a similar impact this season after losing Ben Johnson to the Bears, who's staying in that division, who's going to be seeing them twice a year, who knows the ins and outs of that team, and losing Aaron Glenn to the Jets. This is going to be Jared Goff's first year where he doesn't have a genius offensive play caller on the sideline. This is going to be Jared Goff's first year without Sean McVay calling plays for him and without Ben Johnson calling plays for him. Jared Goff is not enough of a playmaker to overcome his circumstances and lead his team to the playoffs if the system around him isn't right. The system around him has to be in tip-top shape in order for Jared Goff to succeed. Jared Goff is not enough of a playmaker to overcome a failing system or a diminished system. We saw that in his performance against the Commanders in the NFC divisional round last year in the playoffs. 313 passing yards, 1 touchdown, but he also had 3 turnovers, one of which was a pick six. 3 turnovers against the Commanders defense that was not better than his healthy Lions offense. David Montgomery was back healthy that game. Jahmyr Gibbs was healthy that game. Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jameson Williams were healthy that game. Sam Laporta was healthy that game. His all-pro caliber offensive line was healthy that game. 3 interceptions, 3 turnovers against a defense that was not better than his offense. Things were not going right for the Lions in that game. Jared Goff was not enough of a playmaker to fill in that gap, to make up that difference. He was not enough of a playmaker to overcome the circumstances of that game. Jared Goff is a true system quarterback. So even though the Lions are going to have a healthy defense this year, even though the Lions are going to have a healthy offense this year, I think not having Ben Johnson is going to have a huge impact on Jared Goff's ability to succeed in this offense. Not having his all-pro center in Frank Ragnow is going to have a huge impact on Jared Goff's ability to succeed in this offense. Jared Goff is not enough of a playmaker to overcome those 2 key absences, or really 3 key absences, when you count Ben Johnson as offensive coordinator, Frank Ragnow at center, and Aaron Glenn at defensive coordinator. There's no question Jayden Daniels and the Commanders are way more of a threat, are a bigger threat to the Eagles than the Lions this year. I honestly think Jared Goff has a better chance of missing the playoffs this year. Jared Goff and the Lions have a better chance of missing the playoffs this year than they do posing a bigger threat to the Eagles than the Commanders this season. Because Jared Goff is a true system quarterback, but he's not an elite quarterback. He is not a playmaker. Jared Goff is a really good game manager. But he is not going to be a bigger threat to this Eagles team than Jayden Daniels this year. Even Matt Stafford. Like, I look at Matt Stafford and the Rams team. We know Matt Stafford is an elite quarterback in the NFL. He's also a guy who has championship DNA, not just Super Bowl DNA, but Super Bowl winning DNA. He's a guy who has shown capable of being able to overcome his circumstances. Definitely talented, definitely accurate. He's a leader. There's no question in my mind, Jayden Daniels and the Commanders pose a bigger threat to the Eagles this year than Matt Stafford and the Rams. Matt Stafford is elite. He's accurate. He's talented. He can do pretty much anything you need an elite quarterback to do on the field during the game of during regulation minutes. But if you look at Matt Stafford, he's also dealing with an injury right now. Matt Stafford is hurt. He's dealing with an injury right now. So I definitely think a healthy Jayden Daniels with a Terry McLaurin returning to the fold, returning to the offense, is more dangerous than an injured Matt Stafford going into the season. Even with what could be one of the best receiver duos in the NFL this year in Devontae Adams and Puka Nacua, with a decent run game in Kyren Williams, with a good defense that is going to be on the field when he is not on the field. I still think Jayden Daniels and this Commanders team pose a bigger threat to the Eagles than Matt Stafford and this Rams team. Like, Matt Stafford is an older guy. He's an older guy. Devontae Adams is aging a bit. I don't think their offensive line is going to be as good as the Commanders' offensive line this year. I don't see the Rams posing a bigger threat to the Eagles than the Commanders this year, and that's mainly just at the two quarterbacks. I would take a fresh Jaden Daniels, a healthy Jaden Daniels going into his second year with Terry McLaurin, going into his second year in the same Cliff Kingsbury offense, than I would Matt Stafford going into another year where he is now hurt. Even though he has Sean McVay calling the plays, even though he has two healthy receivers in Devontae Adams and Puka Nacua, I don't see him posing a bigger threat to this Eagles team than Jaden Daniels. I look at some of these other quarterbacks like Russell Wilson in the Giants, another guy who's getting older. He has championship DNA, but that's another guy who's getting older, who also I don't think is going to have enough legs in him this year at this stage in his career to overcome that piss poor offensive line in New York. I think Jackson Dart is too young. I think Russell Wilson has a better chance of overcoming the circumstances in New York than Jackson Dart does. I think looking at the Vikings, super talented team overall, but I don't think J.J. McCarthy is more capable of beating or outplaying an Eagles defense than Jaden Daniels showed to be last season. Haven't even seen J.J. McCarthy play yet in a regular season game, so I got to see it first before I can just trust that. Caleb Williams, I mean, we saw the difference in the years those two guys had last season. I think coaching maybe was a big factor in those two differences. But I mean, I'm not confident. I'm not willing to put all my chips on Caleb Williams. Definitely Caleb Williams and a Bears team being a bigger threat to the Eagles this year, as opposed to a seasoned Commanders team under the same regime, same main weapons coming back with some reinforcements, with a better offensive line. I don't think it's crazy to think Jaden Daniels and a Commanders team pose a bigger threat to the Eagles than the Bears team. Caleb Williams and a Bears team who are going into a new regime now in Ben Johnson. There's going to be some growing pains there trying to get acclimated to this Ben Johnson system now, even with the playmakers they have over there in Chicago. There's no other quarterback or team in the NFC that poses a bigger threat to the Eagles than Jaden Daniels and the Commanders. And honestly, I'm more scared of Jaden Daniels and the Commanders than I am of any other quarterback and team in the AFC. In the AFC, I am more scared of seeing Jaden Daniels in the NFC Championship game than I am of seeing Lamar Jackson in the Ravens, Josh Allen in the Bills, Joe Burrow in the Bengals, Patrick Mahomes in the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. I'm more scared of seeing Jaden Daniels in the NFC Championship game than I am of seeing those four guys in the Super Bowl. Like, Jaden Daniels last year, he plays better against this Eagles defense than any of those other quarterbacks, maybe aside from Josh Allen. I think Jaden Daniels poses a bigger threat to this Eagles defense than Lamar Jackson, than Joe Burrow, than Patrick Mahomes, and really Josh Allen. Because if you look at those four guys, I think Jaden Daniels has better coaching than Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, and Joe Burrow. I think Jaden Daniels has more talent around him than Josh Allen and than at least Josh Allen and Joe Burrow. I think he has a better defense that is going to be on the field when he is not than definitely Joe Burrow, a piss poor Bengals defense, than a average to below average Bills defense. And I think he is a better playoff player than Lamar Jackson. And I think he has more composure against this Eagles defense than Patrick Mahomes, than what Patrick Mahomes showed to have in the Super Bowl, leading to a historic historically low performing first half in the Super Bowl. I think Jaden Daniels has something more and does something better than all four of those other quarterbacks. Like Jaden Daniels has at least one thing that those other four quarterbacks don't have. He either has better coaching, Jaden Daniels either has more talent on the offense, he either has a better defense, or he's just more clutch in the playoffs. Jaden Daniels has something that those four quarterbacks in Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, and Patrick Mahomes don't have. He has something that those four guys don't have. He's either better in the playoffs, he has better coaching with Cliff Kingsbury and Dan Quinn. He has more talent on offense, more talent and chemistry on offense, or he has a better defense. As an Eagles fan, I am more worried about Jaden Daniels and this Commanders team, seeing them in the playoffs or the NFC Championship, than I am seeing any of those other four guys, from Patrick Mahomes to Josh to Lamar to Joe, in the Super Bowl. Like you look at Lamar Jackson first. I am more worried about seeing Jaden Daniels and the Commanders in the NFC Championship game than I am about seeing Lamar Jackson in the Super Bowl and Lamar Jackson and the Ravens in a potential Super Bowl matchup. Like if you look at Jaden Daniels and Lamar Jackson, there's no question Jaden Daniels is a better playoff player than Lamar Jackson. Jaden Daniels was a better version of himself, a more composed composed version of himself, a greater version of himself in the playoffs than what we see Lamar Jackson turn into towards that time of the year. Like, honestly, I look at Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson honestly plays more like Dak Prescott in the playoffs than Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson plays more like Dak Prescott in the playoffs than he plays like Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson has more turnovers than he does touchdowns in the postseason. He has 11 total turnovers in the postseason to 10 touchdowns. You look at his most recent playoff game versus the Bills, like it did come down to Mark Andrews not being able to catch the ball. But even before that, Lamar Jackson still had 2 turnovers himself. Lost fumble in the pocket and an interception that really gave the Bills the momentum in that game. It was a momentum shifter turnover. Lamar Jackson is consistently a lesser version of himself in the playoffs, whereas Jaden Daniels is more of himself, is a greater version of himself in the playoffs. Like Lamar Jackson is honestly, he's closer to being Dak Prescott in the playoffs than he is to being Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson is a chronic regular season quarterback until proven otherwise. I would much rather, as the Eagles, I would much rather see Lamar Jackson in the Super Bowl, Lamar Jackson in this Ravens team, than I would rather see Jaden Daniels and the Commanders in the NFC Championship game. Because Lamar Jackson is a chronic regular season quarterback until proven otherwise. I even look at Patrick Mahomes, bro. I look at Patrick Mahomes. I am more worried about seeing Jaden Daniels and the Commanders in the NFC Championship game as an Eagles fan than I am worried about seeing Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs in the Super Bowl again. Because we know what that's going to look like. We saw what that looks like. Patrick Mahomes was completely shut out in the first half. Patrick Mahomes put together, arguably, for being the greatest quarterback in the game right now, he had arguably one of the worst performances ever in Super Bowl history against this Eagles defense. One of the worst Super Bowl performances ever in Eagles history. Tied for second largest halftime deficit in Super Bowl history. Second fewest total yards in the first half in Super Bowl history. Fewest total first half yards in Mahomes' career as a whole. Had the worst QBR ever in the history of the NFL with an 11% QBR, there's no question Jaden Daniels poses more of a threat to this Eagles defense than Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes against this Eagles defense on the biggest stage had one of the worst performances, not only his worst performance as a quarterback, but one of the worst performances ever in the history of the game, in the history of the Super Bowl. Jaden Daniels played better against this Eagles defense than what Patrick Mahomes was able to put together in the Super Bowl. Against that same defense in the prior game, 2 weeks before in the NFC Championship game, Jaden Daniels had over 250 passing yards and one passing touchdown. He put together a way more productive offense against the same defense than what the greatest quarterback in the game right now was able to do against the Eagles defense. Jaden Daniels did more against the best defense in the NFL than what the greatest quarterback, a guy who was fighting for all-time status, was able to do against that same defense. There's no question I would rather play Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs in the Super Bowl, a guy who I know the Eagles are capable of rattling and just utterly devastating and destroying and demolishing in the Super Bowl, then there's no question I would rather play them than I would play a guy who was really able to hold it together, a guy who was going into his second year under the same offense with his same receiver one in Terry McLaurin, with a reinforced offensive line. There's no question there's no question I'm more worried about seeing that guy, Jaden Daniels, in the NFC Championship game or the playoffs than I am in seeing Patrick Mahomes in the Chiefs. Because we saw what this defense is capable of doing to Patrick Mahomes. We saw what this defense is capable of doing to a Chiefs offense. The Commanders gave us more competition in the NFC Championship game than what the Chiefs were able to give us in the Super Bowl. There's no question I think the Commanders, Jaden Daniels and this Commanders team, pose a bigger threat to this Eagles defense than Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. There's no question I'm more worried about seeing Jaden Daniels and the Commanders in the NFC Championship game than I am worried about seeing Joe Burrow and the Bengals in the Super Bowl. One, because the Bengals aren't getting there anytime soon. Joe Burrow isn't getting to the Super Bowl anytime soon. I honestly don't think we'll see Joe Burrow in the playoffs for another 2 years. I am definitely, as an Eagles fan, more worried about Jaden Daniels in the playoffs than I am about Joe Burrow in the Super Bowl. Because one, Joe Burrow has a one-dimensional offense. He has a one-dimensional offense with an abysmal defense. If Tanner McKee could put up over 200 yards against the starting Bengals defense, what do you think Jalen Hurts is going to be able to do to a Bengals defense? What do you think our starters are going to be able to do to a starting Bengals defense? I am way more worried about Jaden Daniels in the playoffs than I am about Joe Burrow in the playoffs as an Eagles fan, because I know Jaden Daniels is honestly, bro, Jaden Daniels is closer to being an elite quarterback, in my opinion, than Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow, to me, is not an elite quarterback. Everybody wants to talk about Joe Burrow being over Jalen Hurts, Joe Burrow being one of them ones in the NFL. Joe Burrow is not an elite quarterback. He has done nothing to show he's an elite quarterback. We continue to give Joe Burrow this credit and this rep for one Super Bowl appearance he made 3 years ago. We are still rewarding Joe Burrow for something that he did 3 years ago. And in making that Super Bowl appearance, he had one of the most complete offenses in the NFL. He had one of the better defenses in the NFL. Since losing pieces on offense, since the defense has gotten significantly worse, we haven't seen Joe Burrow do anything since. Joe Burrow, no MVPs, no All-Pros, 2 Pro Bowl selections. Joe Burrow hasn't done anything significant to show that he is an elite quarterback in the NFL, especially in comparison to Jalen Hurts, especially in comparison to Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels is closer to being an elite quarterback in the NFL than Joe Burrow right now. Jaden Daniels proved that he was the greatest rookie quarterback of all time. Only rookie quarterback in the history of the NFL to make it to the NFC Championship game without having an elite defense. Multiple franchise records for the Commanders. Multiple records, regular season records for the NFL as a rookie. There's no question Jaden Daniels is closer to being an elite quarterback than Joe Burrow is right now. So I'm definitely, as an Eagles fan, more worried about seeing Jaden Daniels in the playoffs or in the NFC Championship game than I am about seeing Joe Burrow, because one, it's like every other year he's hurt and misses most of the season. But then when he is on the field, he doesn't, like, he's not able, like, because he doesn't have the talent to match, he's not able to, like, elite quarterbacks are supposed to overcome their circumstances. Joe Burrow hasn't done that. Joe Burrow has not overcome his circumstances. Joe Burrow will lead the league in passing yards. He'll lead the league in passing touchdowns. But he'll also, in the same year, miss the playoffs. I'm honestly tired of the excuses. Like, he doesn't have a run game. He doesn't have a defense. Like, Jalen Hurts had a failing offense. Jalen Hurts had a defense that was really worse than what the Bengals were last year in 2023. He was still able to make the playoffs. Joe Burrow is not an elite quarterback. I think he can be, obviously, having the regular season numbers that he does, the talent that he does. Joe Burrow is not an elite quarterback. As an Eagles fan, I am more worried about seeing Jaden Daniels in the NFC Championship game or the playoffs than I am about seeing Joe Burrow in the Super Bowl, because Jaden Daniels is closer to being an elite quarterback than Joe Burrow is. Joe Burrow is honestly Justin Herbert, just with 2 really good receivers. Joe Burrow is really Justin Herbert with 2 really good receivers, 2 elite receivers. He's a guy who will put up huge numbers in the regular season, but won't be able to translate that in the playoffs if he even gets to the playoffs. I'm not going to keep rewarding Joe Burrow with this elite level status, with this head of the pack rep, for something that he did 3 years ago. I'm not going to give Joe Burrow more respect than a guy who literally gave the Eagles a run for their money. The best defense in the NFL as a rookie gave the Eagles more comp than more than half of these elite quarterbacks in the NFL, than more than half of these supposedly elite teams in the NFL. I'm not going to give Joe Burrow more respect. I'm not going to give a guy like Joe Burrow more respect than a guy like Jaden Daniels after what he was able to do last season. And then, especially if you look at the Commanders and the Bengals, Jaden Daniels is going into his second year under a Cliff Kingsbury offense. There's no question Jaden Daniels has better coaching than what Joe Burrow has and Zach Taylor. There's no question Jaden Daniels and this Commanders team pose a bigger threat to this Eagles team than Joe Burrow and the Bengals. There's no question. So I'm definitely more worried about Jaden Daniels and this Commanders team than I am really any other team in the entire NFL, because what we were able to see Jaden Daniels do last year, having the all-time historic Rookie of the Year caliber season he had, the talent they were able to retain and also bring into this Commanders team, extending Terry McLaurin, bringing in Debo, drafting a guy like Jalen Lane, who was a sleeper in the draft, reinforcing this offensive line with guys like Laramie Tunsil, Josh Connerly Jr., developing a Brandon Coleman, who was a standout rookie last year. The work that they did on the defensive side of the ball, bringing in Javon Kinlaw, extending Frankie Louvu and Bobby Wagner, bringing in Von Miller, drafting Trey Amos, being able to develop Mike Sanderstill. There's no question, as an Eagles fan, I'm more worried about Jaden Daniels and this Commanders team than I am any other quarterback or team in the entire NFL. But that's all for today's edition of No Shame with Shane. If you haven't already, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe to all of our social media platforms, and I will be back later on with more shameless takes.